Welcome to this 6th edition of our Tempest Storm Shadowverse Meta Snapshot breakdown. The Verdant Conflict established Natura Haven as the dominant deck in rotation, with little to no counters in sight. Your best bet for getting results was to play Natura Haven yourself, generating Naturan Great Trees and assembling a burst damage finisher faster than your opponent. This changed when Cygames nerfed City of Gold, reducing the effectiveness of Haven power cards like Destiny Winged Knight and the Priest of Excess. We anticipated Naturan Haven to become slower, opening more spots for niche decks to make a return. The rotation format has a greater diversity of decks than we've seen from recent expansions, shaking out much of what the Verdant Conflict originally brought to Shadowverse. Before we dive into these changes, make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with the latest developments in Tempest Storm news and Shadowverse content. Now, let's get right to it. Tier 1 now only features 2 decks, with Natura Shadow falling to mid-tier 2, and Natura Haven and the Roach Forest remaining the top decks of the latter. The nerf to City of Gold in October was strong enough to slow down Natura Haven, but Natura Haven is still capable of executing a powerful storm-based strategy that has access to Meowskers, Agnes, and Craving Splendor combo. The divide between Tier 1 and Tier 2 was reduced in response to the balance patch, but it is still a significant enough threat on the ladder to reign supreme for another month. Only Alana Haven threatens any real competition, and even then, only barely. We've seen the deck develop into a more combo-oriented variant, removing City of Gold and cheaper followers for more tutoring cards, such as Marcotte, Heretical Sister, and Shiva. We expect the deck to continue reigning over the meta until the mini-expansion at the end of this month. Roach Forest also remains as a top Tier 1 deck, second only to Natura Haven. The balance patch ignored the Whirlwind Rhinoceros combo, allowing it to continue preying on the slower decks of the format, especially Natura Dragon, Artifact Portal, and Natura Shadow. With Natura Haven being slower, players are exchanging some of their removal cards in favor of Ward on Killing. This card grants both draws for consistency and a damage mitigation shield. Unfortunately, this will leave the deck more vulnerable to Alana Haven, which plays Realm of Repose, threatening the Roach Forest win condition. So you will need to tech your deck for either hard removal or against combo decks, as you see them to find the best results with this deck. Among the most notable changes in Tier 2 are the fall of Alana Haven, the greater diversity of decks in Tier 2, and the rise of Natura Dragon. At the top of Tier 2, Natura Dragon, Ambush Sword, and Natura Forest are seeing more play. A slower meta in response to the City of Gold nerf gives Natura Dragon better resilience against hard removal and aggro threatening the deck's weak early game. Now, the deck is better able to establish a slow but powerful series of win conditions, such as Shadow's Corrosion from Valdane Cursed Shadow, or Neptune Tide Mistress to finish off your opponent. Despite its favored matchups against mid-range decks such as Natura Forest, Natura Dragon still falls victim to the best 2 decks in the format. It's worth noting that aggressive decks such as Ambush Sword and Vengeance Blood have made a small resurgence. If these aggressive decks establish themselves, we could see Natura Dragon fall to Tier 3 by the end of the month. But mid-range decks are popular enough for this Dragoncraft archetype to be the top Tier 2 deck. Ambush Sword is one of the biggest success stories that emerged from the October balance patch. From Tier 4 obscurity to Tier 2 dominance, the Swordcraft archetype is now one of the 4 best decks on the rotation ladder. Priest of Excess was the most substantial threat to Ambush Sword, being a consistent answer to Leod the Crescent Blade, thus rendering the archetype useless against the most popular deck in the format. The rise of Natura Dragon and Artifact Portal are another factor in Ambush Sword's rise to power, providing 2 targets to prey upon in the current meta. We've seen Jiraiya being replaced with Gourmet Emperor's Kitchen as a cheaper removal option that adds to Ambush Sword's damage plan, making the deck even more of a budget alternative for newer players looking to try one of the most competitive decks. Behind Natura Dragon and Ambush Sword on the tier list is Natura Forest. The archetype is well-rounded, with only a slightly unfavored matchup against Natura Haven and Natura Dragon. It offers Forestcraft players a more consistent strategy, as the deck is not subjected to the randomness of drawing Whirlwind Rhinoceros and bounce draws in Roach Forest, a deck which Natura Forest is favored against. While the deck struggles against Artifact Portal and Natura Dragon, its positive matchups against Ambush Sword and Roach Forest are strong enough to make Natura Forest a relevant force in rotation. Natura Shadow fell from grace to the middle of Tier 2 after the most recent meta shift. Beforehand, the archetype was able to push an early advantage to secure the board until it was able to play out its own late-game win condition. In this post-patch meta, other decks are simply more refined and better able to handle mid-range board-based strategies, like Natura Shadow. Shadow. The archetype's lack of access to wards makes it an easy target for Natura Haven and Roach Forest, who both are able to defeat the Shadowcraft archetype before Thoth becomes a relevant threat. Yak achieved a 23-game win streak with the featured build, demonstrating the deck's ability to produce great results under a skilled pilot. But we anticipate the deck won't perform at its old power level until the next expansion. Lastly, Artifact Portal remains in the lower half of Tier 2, while other decks have grown in prominence. The Portalcraft archetype was able to keep up, thanks to the newly buffed Xion, Mercurial Aegis. We anticipated Xion opening the possibility of new, proactive builds capable of pushing great damage in the mid-game, a lack of which was the most glaring weakness of this deck's pre-nerf build. Now, Xion's Accelerate ability gave Artifact Portal early game strength to contend with the current meta. Competitive player Matsu ran 3 copies of Xion in his Rage Shadowverse Pro League deck, alongside Artifact Call and Dazzling Archer for early game artifact generation and draw options. Unfortunately, player skill is a large factor in the deck's perceived power level, where mistakes are even more substantially punished than seen when playing decks that execute more streamlined strategies. If mastered, the deck can be a reliable force against both Natura Haven and Natura Dragon, being one of the only decks to find a favorable matchup against both archetypes. While Natura Haven still has no counter strong enough to keep this deck from reigning over the meta, the nerf to City of Gold changed the speed of the deck and its access to hard removal. This allowed other archetypes to rise and contest other corners of the meta. For instance, Ambush Sword rose in popularity in response to this patch, now serving as a counter against Artifact Portal, Natura Dragon, and Natura Shadow. There are other decks in the top 2 tiers that influence the effectiveness of these 5 decks featured in this Tempeststorm Shadowverse Meta Snapshot breakdown. The Meta Snapshot itself is linked in the description below, featuring matchup percentages, in-depth deck analyses, and more. The meta is in a diverse enough state that what ultimately becomes the best deck for climbing the rotation ladder is up to what decks you encounter the most. That being said, Natura Forest has been gaining popularity lately, to a point where 8 Natura Forest decks were featured in the finals of the latest JCG Shadowverse Open tournament in Japan, with Roach Forest being notably absent. This can signal a potential meta shift in the highest levels of Shadowverse competition, which may end up influencing the latter in the coming weeks. A shift from the current Tier 1 Roach Forest to Natura Forest may end up shuffling the meta even further. In conclusion, the Verdant Conflict is closing out with Natura Haven and Roach Forest as the clear winners of this expansion. Tier 1 established itself early in this expansion, while the power level between Tiers 1 and 2 are clear enough to give Tier 2 room to grow in response to this October balance patch. The win rate advantage of players going first or second is mitigated in a slower meta, demonstrating Cygames' ability to respond to meta states before they become unhealthy. We anticipate the mini expansion at the end of this month doing even more to shake up the meta. Be sure to tune in to the next installment of Tempeststorm's Buddy System Tournament Series airing on November 23rd at 12 p.m. Pacific, including a card reveal live on stream from Potwasher. What do you want to see in the mini expansion? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the latest Tempeststorm news and Shadowverse content. Thanks for watching.